24, Driving Business.
Well, good to have you back. Many thanks for joining us if you're just joining in. And this is the Policon, where we discuss politics and economics. Well, big discussions today. It's because we are literally including persons with disabilities in the show. Like I did mention earlier on, that it's a new experience for most of you out there and for me, the host. But it's something more like a learning curve. Something that we should get used to, something that looks at championing the mere fact that we need to have this balance, not only looking at gender equality, but also looking at equality amongst each one of us, despite one's abilities to do certain things or not. And well, of course, our topic of discussion today is looking at the inclusion of persons with disabilities in Uganda's electoral process or election system, or the election era, or that particular time of the election, and all these decisions in regards to who your leader is, or in regards to the policies that are being pushed out there. And of course, I'm still with my three guests. I did mention though, the third is more like a ghost guest. You will only be hearing his voice, but not seeing him physically. He's in here to interpret for us what the other guest, who is Inangat Deo, a program assistant at Show Uganda, who is a person with disability, and he's definitely someone who he's a deaf. If I'm to look at that, he's a deaf personality, and that means he cannot easily listen to what I'm saying. But he has an interpreter with him. But also on the other hand, we're still with Mr. Otim Ivan, who is from the African Youth Development Link. And of course, you get to realize the catchword there would be link. How do we link the youth into certain situations? Otim, as we return with our conversation, my focus now turns on some of the challenges that the persons with disabilities are facing in this modern age. What have they faced in the face of the election system in Uganda?
Yes, so first of all, from the level of inclusion, there is a problem with attitude across the citizens, where people with disabilities are desegregated in terms of telling them that they should be able to participate in the politics of basically their identity only. So they tell them, you go and run for elections for disability. They don't see them as equal opportunity in regards to how they can participate in other categories across. So bring that to the point, we have the issue around cost of the election. I've just told you in my previous engagement that the Uganda's Electoral College for Disabilities is a national college. It's categorically different from a youth electoral college, which is more regional. That means someone who is campaigning for a position to be member of parliament will have to undergo a campaign that is equivalent to what the president undergoes. She will have to go across the college, across all the colleges in these districts of Uganda, and be able to reach out and campaign. Now, I can tell you that despite even the cost, someone has a disability, it's already a limitation, a barrier. So you're adding another barrier to them. So we have within our legal frameworks, our policies, very, very issues that we need to highlight as more issues that we can maybe contextualize as issues that are limiting people's participation. And one of those is that one. Now the issue is around inclusive communication. I just highlighted to you that across very important communication spaces for the Electoral Commission, on maybe very important communication on voter education, you hardly see inclusive communication tools. You hardly see, even when the media is highlighting some of these messages, accessible inclusive communication is not made available. That means across the board, you are either limiting a greatest number of the citizens who are eligible voters and not able to be able to participate meaningfully because they don't have access to information. So you have these barriers that are more meaningfully addressed as a people. But again, you also have another barrier around data, just like I talked about. So if a country doesn't have very disaggregated data that is able to include people with disabilities across, then it's going to be difficult for the stakeholders to be able to plan for how to help those kind of categories. So those kind of challenges bring us to the forefront that, for example, when you look at the National Voter Register, it is lacking in disaggregation. The Electoral Commission will highlight for you how many male, how many female were able to participate in the election. But they will not highlight to you how many people with disabilities were able to participate. That is not their fault. Just like I told you, their fault is that as a country, we don't have a very clean data system that is disaggregating disability, but more so disability categories. The issue that I also highlight is the accessibility to many of these venues and nomination areas in terms of physical accessibility, but also sometimes you can talk about accessibility in terms of access to information. The other challenge that I also like to highlight is that you have the favorable college system that I just highlighted, that you have a national college system preferred to rather than a regional college. And then the issue of also statism. So we have members of parliament representing persons with disabilities. First of all, with the argument that this is an affirmative seat that was created to offer opportunity, but also representation. But when you have a challenge where someone is there for almost ever and ever, then the question is, when is going to be, what time will that be when someone else will come up to offer themselves because someone has, first of all, the resources, the money to compete, and is over there staying into the same position. So these challenges cut across and kind of a barrier to how people with disabilities meaningfully participate across the electoral system.
Well, and let me get back to Dale Gracious here. Dale, the challenges that you're facing is what we want to understand more in regards to the election system. Where are those challenges? Besides the fact that you did mention, well, it's hard for you to vote your preferred candidate because someone else is helping you do that. You have an assistant who, by look of things, is ideally going to choose their own favorite person. And that means you won't be able to vote according to what you thought you would. So what other challenges have you been able to face from the look of things? That is one, economically, socially, and then the political side.
Thank you very much. Under economics, nomination fee is expensive. Some person with disability cannot because they don't have jobs. Like now, if you raise maybe LOC 5, nomination like 5 million. You see, now a powerful person is the one who will decide that because he wants to stay longer, so he will increase the money for nomination. Politically, there are no vacant positions for persons with disability. Starting from the lower village up to the top, but around the village, village level, up to the top, national level. But the greatest challenge is at the lowest level in the villages because they are not representatives. Similarly now, I focus for us, National Council. I want to see that the person with disability is represented in National Council, Youth Council, or National Council with disability. The challenges for persons with disability will continue to happen because there is no one who is representing them in most of those levels. Socially, the character, attitude. Character is similar as attitude. People who supervise the election or the polling stations, we need to sensitize them before they come to the polling station. They see a disabled person, but the look of the face is not nice. So every person, they should know that every person comes there with a disability, and every disability needs assistance. That's what I would want to say.
Oh, wow. That's another big part of learning that I'm experiencing as one, and I believe most of the leaders have got less information regarding the same. Taking me back to leadership now, the political part of it. And I do believe, as Mr. Otim Ivan will be giving me more of this, we've had a key highlight in regards to term limits. And this is something that is up for conversations out there in regards to reasons as to why persons with disabilities seem to be less represented or underrepresented, for the better word. How does this happen, and why are we in such situations? But anyways, how are we going to get out of it?
Yes, first of all, I would just like to pick from what they was highlighting earlier on the issue of youth representation from the National Youth Council. Now, this constitution of ours gave the young people a very good platform where they can participate from the village level to the sub-county, to the parish, to the district, to the national level through representation of the college system. Now, what happens at the college, what happens at the National Youth Council is that young people with disabilities are nominated, one nominee is nominated by Disability People's Organization. Now, that leaves the critical aspect of what the idea of the National Youth Council was to how inclusive it is. And here we're also echoing the need to kind of push the reform around the National Youth Council, to have an inclusion bit from the village level for youth with disability, so that you can have the same upgrade with the young person with disabilities, who can then after nominate and maybe engage their leaders at different levels, and that makes them also representative in terms of how the National Youth Council will begin to view the youth issues around disabilities. Right now, it's very difficult, and if you hear that from the sounds of that young man, he will tell you that the issues that he normally wants to speak about are not recognized, because first of all, they don't recognize that young man as a representative because he's nominated to be part of the council. And also it brings in the attitude aspects of how people view people with disabilities across. So we have those kind of challenges of hindering representation. When it comes to the district level, let me just talk about how it comes to the local level. Those structures of disabilities are not very active structures within the government system. And that's, like I said, economics, politics is not dealing from economics. When you have structures that are very critical like that, that means the voices of those that need the people to speak about the issues that affect them is not going to be hard at every level. So you have those kind of challenges and making representation kind of difficult. For example, you have a district representative for persons with disabilities having to mobilize the electorates across who are probably disabled people to bring them into one venue. And then there's no support to that kind of. So we have kind of perceptions across our governance systems that we can need to address. When it comes to our parliament here, this I've heard that when you look at the representative, they are kind of not representing different disability categories. And actually, some of the people within the disability fraternity will be mindful and say, can we share these 5 slots in disability categories? Because they believe that people representing them are probably physically disabled. So how about sharing a slot for visually impaired, for member of parliament? How about sharing a slot for physically impaired so that we can share those slots equally? And that means representation, because democracy that we have chosen is representative democracy. And if you're not in it, then you are illusion in how you're going to be representing that same person. So we can have those challenges put into context, because then they affect the representation of the people at different levels.
Well, and I get back to Imlanga Deogracious here. I need to know, do you know your representatives for persons with disabilities? And have you in any way interacted with some of them in the long run after the election process? And have they ever, if at all, luckily you've met one or two, have they ever worked on the key basics of the things that the persons with disabilities are facing?
Thank you very much. I know we do have 5 members of parliament representing I tried to meet some MPs, for example, in Central, yes, MP, we had communication, and it's true, I presented the issue. Some did try to give a hand, but do you know that the challenge is not that small, because it needs including more leaders who are representing persons with disability. The same way Mr. Tim said that it is important to have a representative representing this different disability, because every kind of disability has a different experience. The visual have their own experience, the deaf have their own experiences. I know that we do have MPs who are representatives, but it's important for government to coordinate with the MPs government should to see that election is made inclusive, because what is happening right now is should for that time before, yet we need to move to inclusivity. But you see that most of the MPs who are there were voted previously, and they're the same persons who are appearing every election. Maybe this time we'll have to find a way we can change them.
All right. And now, Deogracious, do you have any, if you're to look at, do you have any legal and policies that you follow as persons with disabilities, and are you okay with some of those policies, or rather that legal framework that governs the persons with disabilities, and do you follow them, and are they fair enough?
I know we do have a policy that supports, first, like affirmative action, that is in the area of education, to see that a person with disability gets educated. We have another one, lies the Disability Act of 2020. It's very true, the act is there, and to present issues that a person with disability faces in voting and other areas. But where is the challenge? The practice. They don't implement. We do have other policies too that they use, international ones, CRPD. Where is the challenge? The implementation. We do try to make policies, but the implementation is a very big challenge. That's why we focus on seeing how that can be changed.
Okay, and of course, well, you look at the fact that Demographics identifies that, well, the implementation of the policies becomes very challenging to most of them. But, well, as well as you try to look through most of situations in the country, is that the policies are always there. Lack of implementation has always been a key setback for Uganda. Takes me back to Mr. Otim here. If you're to look at how we are going to work on the implementation, and more so when it comes to ensuring that if there is a special package, because the president does offer packages for different, there is a package normally for women. Now, let's say the Parish Development Model Program, looking at women and persons with disabilities as a way to at least uplift them into the money economy. How then are we going to, have, that realistic approach of ensuring that there is transparency and that persons with disabilities, just like Deo, can benefit?
It's a simple question. Just like they will say that the legal framework exists. Article 21 of our Constitution prohibits discrimination. Article 32 offers affirmative action. Article 35 is explicit on the rights of persons with disabilities to participate in an election. Then Article 41 on the right to access information, again, is very clear. So despite other international obligation, the Convention on the Rights for People with Disabilities, the African Charter on Democracy and Governance within the UN systems. So you have this holistic legal policy framework. So one of the things that we are thinking about, for example, is if we have the legal framework in place, can we do an assessment and see where the challenge is? Is it about the attitude? And if it's about the attitude, when you are running an election and the people running the elections are probably not mindful about the levels of inclusion, can we prepare, for example, the electoral management officers to have some levels of disability mindfulness? If it's about communication, can we train them on some basic sign language interpretation, so that when someone with someone with a hard of hearing comes and needs some sign language support, there is those basic kind of interventions we can come up with. The other issue is participation that I also likely to highlight. If we have the Constitution offering the guidelines or the guidance on how people can participate, despite of their gender, sex, or ability. Can we go then and approve the levels of active involvement across the sector? And one of the things here we're highlighting within our electoral process, if we are running an election that is a cycle of pre, during, and post, how inclusive are all these processes to people with disabilities? If we are mapping out electoral areas, for example, that probably are in areas that may look inaccessible, like Kanungu or Kasese or all the hill areas, how have we involved the people with disabilities within the structure to kind of identify and say, no, this venue for a polling station A is not accessible. So the participation has to be meaningful. It doesn't have to come at the end. It has to come throughout the process. The other issue is communication. As a country, I think we are doing badly on the levels of inclusion. And just like Smart 24 here has a sign language interpreter, yes, this is a very excellent move that as a country, we must take into deliberate strategies to drive inclusion at all levels, no matter the cost. It is very expensive, but because it's about not leaving no one behind, then we must do everything beyond our power to make sure that things like communication is accessible. If it's about offering braille material to people with visual impairment, if it's about offering hard prints for people with some levels of sight problems, if it's about tools and devices that can be able to allow accessibility to information, then we can do it as a country. So it's just about attitude, it's about ability, it's about communication, but we can do it as a country going forward.
All right, now for the viewers out there, you still watching the Policon. When we return, we'll return with our last part of the conversations, rotating around inclusion of persons with disabilities. This time around, looking at the recommendations that my two guests feel should be priority in the next financial year more so, and also in the next elections of 2026. Stick around. Smart 20.